So I become certified in 1981 by Ghosh's College of India. My certification did not come from Bikram Yoga College of India. It came from Calcutta, Ghosh's College of India. This is part 2 in a video series on my personal journey. Hi everyone, if this is the first time we're meeting, my name is Jimmy Barkan. Please consider subscribing, hit the notification bell, then you get notified when I post a new video. Share it with your friends. Anytime you're enjoying it, hit the like button. So in last week's video, I talked about my early days with Bikram. But before we go to the part where I moved to Florida and opened my studio, I want to talk just a little bit about the history of Bikram and the way I perceived it and the way I've been told. So Bikram started in Bengal, India, in Calcutta, with his teacher Vishnu Ghosh when he was 3 years old, and soon became one of his top teachers. Then his first teaching job was in Mumbai. Back then it was called Bombay. Then he moved from Bombay to Tokyo because Vishnu Ghosh had a big affinity to the Japanese culture. And in fact, through my connections through Bikram Yoga over the years, I have a big Barkan method contingency in Tokyo. We have about 15 Barkan teachers that are now teaching in Japan. So Bikram went to Japan after Bombay, and then he moved to the United States, but he first came to Hawaii. You should always talk about how he met Don Ho. Some of you remember Don Ho, Tiny Bubbles in the Wine. That was the song. Bikram used to sing it to us in class all the time. So then from Hawaii, he moved to San Francisco and didn't like San Francisco. And then he moved to Beverly Hills. And that's where he pretty much staked his claim in revolutionizing yoga in America. And one of the very first videos I did, actually the first video I did, and you can watch the thumbnail to the video on how yoga can transform your life, I talked about why Bikram started the whole concept of heating the room. Because in Calcutta, you just open the windows, but it's still 105 degrees or 41 degrees centigrade. But then when he moved to Japan, it was freezing cold. So he wanted to simulate the conditions of Calcutta. So he started to turn on heat lamps or space heaters to get the room nice and hot. And then he realized, because that's what it is. And I talk about it in this video. His favorite metaphor, you take a piece of steel to a blacksmith and you tell him you want a sword or a knife. The first thing he's going to do is put it in the fire. He heats it up and then he can mold it in any shape he wants. So that's how he came up with the concept of heating the room. But when Bikram came to Beverly Hills, he was actually sponsored by Shirley MacLaine. So Shirley MacLaine found him when he was in Mumbai. Now this is what Bikram told me. So I don't know how exactly accurate it is, but she brought him to the United States. And the very first person Bikram taught for, the only person he ever taught for, besides Vishnu Ghosh, was Anne-Marie Benstrom. And Shirley MacLaine introduced him to all the movie stars and record producers and all the famous athletes. They all started coming to Bikram. And that's even a little bit before I even came on the scene in the late 70s. And Bikram was on all the talk shows, and he wrote his first book. The red cover book was his first book. So all these celebrities and all the movie stars are coming to Bikram's class. And what I believe made Bikram so successful in the whole California yoga scene, he was extremely charming. He had this Asian Indian mystique about him. He was also very sweet. And, people think about how tough and strong Bikram was. He was, and he would kick your butt in that class. He didn't care about your celebrity status. He was still going to work you hard in that classroom. And they loved that. They loved not being treated like a celebrity. They liked coming in and getting their ass kicked by Bikram. But at the same time, he was extremely sweet, very encouraging, and he would introduce lots of modifications if needed. And see, I believe what happened in my own personal account with a lot of the new Bikram teachers would go out and start teaching, and they would introduce modifications to their classroom. They would teach everybody the same. Bikram was different. Bikram showed you the modifications and the advanced amplifications as well. Bikram was extremely charming and funny. We talk about his favorite restaurants, the movie he went to last night, and how much he loved that movie. And he would bring that energy into the room and have fun. I remember when I was on the Yoga Journal conference circuit, this is much years later, and I was back then, I was still Bikram, and I taught a Bikram class. And a good friend of mine who I met on the conferences, his name was Rodney Yee. He's a very famous yogi. He was on the Prana mattress commercials. Anyway, he said to me, I never really got Bikram Yoga because he taught a version of his own version of the Iyengar Yoga, what I call the Krishnacharya. He says, I never really got Bikram Yoga until I took your class because you added a lightness to it and a fun energy to it, which I was just pretty much emulating Bikram, except for bringing my own personality into it. He says, everyone, I took a Bikram class, everyone was so tough and so strong, and the class was so strong and so tough. It was just an overwhelming experience. You brought this Shakti or yin energy to this yang experience, or the Shiva energy, so you really brought the two together. So I really appreciated that comment from Rodney. Thank you very much. That's what I believe made Bikram so likable, so lovable, and exploded into the Beverly Hills scene. And you couldn't even get in those classes in the early 80s when I came in. It was pretty much packed. Now, that doesn't mean he wasn't tough. If you listened to everything Bikram said, and I did, then you were his best friend. He would love you forever. But if you didn't listen to him, if you challenged him, watch out. And it's not just Bikram. You know, people have this concept of yoga that everyone's just loving and wonderful. We just accept who you are. And that's part of it. But at the same time, in the yoga classroom, even Vishnudevananda teaches another style of yoga, Shivananda. He even says in his famous book, Complete Illustrated Book of Yoga, he says that the yoga room is a dictatorship. And I've been told that Iyengar, even though I never met Iyengar, so this is what I've been told, so it's sort of hearsay, but he was also extremely strict. And he would this is what they told me, he would make somebody cry in every single class he taught. And then when his daughter took over, after he passed away, she was even tougher than he was. So this whole mystique about the yoga teacher in India just being so loving and accepting, they are. But at the same time, they're going to kick your butt. And you better listen to what they say in that classroom or watch out. So Bikram was charming and sweet and full of all these wonderful stories. But if you were to disobey him, if you were to call him out in front of other people, and I've seen him just explode and go crazy back in the old days. But like I said, his toughness was part of his allure, is part of his one of the reasons why he became so successful in California. But I believe it was the other side. It was the way he encouraged people. His charming self is what made Bikram Yoga so explosive. So this is part 2 of the video I did last week on my early days with Bikram. So we found a location in Fort Lauderdale on Oakland Park Boulevard. And on January 19th, 1983, we opened the doors and nobody came. The first day, not one person showed up. And the second day, January 20th, was now the official day. We had 2 people. Came at I think it was a 4:30 class, not even the early morning class. And one of the people in that class, her name was Susan Summerstein, she still came to my class to this day. So one of the things we did to get the word out was we advertised on radio. We took a big advertisement in the local newspaper, the Sun Sentinel. And then within about a week or so, people saw the advertisements and they started coming in. So right in the beginning, because of the advertisement, we started getting a whole bunch of people in the classroom. Now, my schedule was insane. Don't forget, I was telling you in the last video that Bikram taught every single class, and so did I. I had no teachers back then. So we did a 7 a.m. class, a 7:30 class, a 9 a.m. class, 10:30 class, 12 o'clock I would do my own. Actually, we started with the 12 o'clock class, and soon I turned that into advanced class when my students were at that advanced level. And then big break, and then came back 4:30 and 6. It was 6 classes a day that I did for the first 6 months. And it was intense. It was definitely one of the hardest things I ever did, not just because I was teaching 6 classes a day, which is insane in itself, but because nobody was used to the heat, especially in Florida. Now, we did open in January, so it wasn't quite as hot as we got into the summertime. But they're saying, turning on the heat in Florida, they were freaking out. And not only that, another reason why it was so tough is because I had to demonstrate every single pose in every single class because nobody knew what they were doing. And then the next year, in 1985, Bikram comes with his wife, Rajashri. That's the first time I met Rajashri. It was 1985, when she had come from India, And it was an arranged marriage by Bisha Ghosh, who was Vishnu Ghosh's son and one of Bikram's best friends. And also, she wasn't Rajashree's guru, but also she was like Rajashree's big brother. And he's the one that arranged the marriage between Bikram and Rajashree. And then Bikram just continued to come to my studio every single year, at least into the 90s. And I would go to his house 3-4 times a year. So I was saying before, Bikram and I actually got closer after I moved to Florida than when I was in California. So when I was doing my teacher training apprenticeship program back in 1980-81, one of the people I was doing, there was only 3 of us. One of the people I was doing it with was Paul Grilly. Paul Grilly is one of the people responsible for now creating what's known as Yin Yoga. Paul Grilly was then teaching for Bikram, and he was on call. But very soon they had a falling out and they split. And now Bikram splits with Tony, and then I slide in to becoming Bikram's most senior teacher. And I used to always say I was Bikram's most senior teacher because I was the only one left. He had a falling out with everybody else up to this point. And another reason we were so far away from each other, this is pre-internet, that we were 3,000 miles away from each other. I wasn't on his radar to do anything to upset him, so I continued to stay in his good graces. And then later on, when Bikram Yoga started becoming more internationally popular, I would then go out to these different conferences to represent Bikram Yoga. So I went out onto the circuit to represent Bikram and Bikram Yoga. But like I said before, Bikram and I became a lot friendlier and a lot tighter. He used to always say that was his brother. We were family. In fact, he and my father became also extremely close. And I used to always kid Bikram, and that's one of the reasons why he loved me so much, because I'm the only people, one of the few people that could talk to him this way. I'd say, Bikram, I'd look in his house and I'd look in his office and I'd see pictures of just him or him and a celebrity. And I said, Bikram, you can't have postures of just you. You have to have somebody else in the photo. All over the place, just you, or you and a celebrity. But the only picture that Bikram had in his office that wasn't either just him or him and a celebrity was a picture of him and my dad. And I can't find that picture anywhere, but that was they became extremely close. And Bikram's wife, Rajashree, and I also became very close. I remember we did an advanced teacher's training program in California years later, and she was obviously there, and she was awarding all the certificates at the end of the program. And she said one of the sweetest things, she said, and this last person I'm going to give the certificate to, he and I had a connection before I could even speak English. So that was really a cool thing that she said. And to this day, in fact, she came to Florida just a few months ago, and we ended up having a Starbucks together. And we actually are going to be doing a workshop in 2022, so stay tuned, and I will let you know when that's going to be as well. But Rajashree and I became also very, very close. So around 1988, 1989, and my school's open 5-6 years now, I said to Bikram, look, I need teachers. I just can't be teaching every single class myself. It's insane. It's too much. So he said, okay, why don't you do what I did? You do an apprenticeship program, and you train them. You let me know, and when you give me the approval, I'll give them a certificate from Ghosha's College of India. This is, again, before the Bikram Yoga College of India certificates were even created yet. So I certified about 25, close to 30 students in Fort Lauderdale that were my students, and then certified them to be Bikram teachers. So I was one of the only people that Bikram allowed to certify Bikram teachers other than himself. Now, as we get into the mid to late 1990s, the Yoga Journal conferences started happening, the Omega conferences, Yoga conference started happening, and Bikram said, you go out and represent me in these conferences. And that's when I started to get familiar with other styles of yoga, what I call the Krishnamacharyan side, the Vinyasa that came out of Ashtanga, and the Iyengar teachers, and teachers like Rodney Yee and Sean Korn and Shiva Ray. And Baron Baptiste, but even though Baron Baptiste, after I moved to Florida, he had found Bikram, and he actually lived in Bikram's house for a while. And then he just split up and he did his own thing. And then he became more on the Krishnamacharyan side. But I became friendly with all these people on the circuit, and because I was there representing Bikram, and I was turned on to a different type of yoga we're going to talk about in another video. And that's how I started to incorporate different postures and different ideas and alignment concepts into my approach to hot yoga and my approach to hatha yoga. So needless to say, it was very difficult when nobody knew how to do anything. And I had to demonstrate every single pose, and the resistance to the heat was intense. People just couldn't understand why we're turning heat on in South Florida. It was a whole different concept. And the next video we do, I'm going to talk about my connection with all the sports teams in South Florida, the Miami Dolphins, the Florida Marlins, now they're the Miami Marlins, the Miami Heat, and the Florida Panthers, and how all that started happening. I started to teach them. So make sure you stay tuned for that video. So that's our episode for today. Thank you so much for watching. Please share it with your friends. If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and hit the bell so you'll be notified every time I post a new video. And I thank you for watching, and stay tuned for the next one. Bye, everyone.